All right. Howard William Morenz, or Howie Bill Morenz, as Mike called him, was a Canadian professional hockey player, lived from 1902 until 1937, dying at just 34 years old. So, of the first three guys that we've covered now, none of them have made it to 40.
Wow.
Which is kind of crazy. Hod Stewart, as we recall, died in a swimming accident in his late 30s, and Vesna died tuberculosis.
How'd Howie die?
We'll find out.
Oh, okay.
Oh, he was born in Mitchell, Ontario. Played professional hockey in the NHL from 1924 to 1937. Was a center. You guys spell it different than we. I think you spell it cooler than we do, but
the proper way.
Yeah, there we go. 12 of his 14 professional seasons were spent with the Montreal Canadiens. He also did stints with the Blackhawks and New York Rangers. In 550 career NHL games, Morenz scored 271 goals, added 201 assists for 472 points. He was a 3-time Stanley Cup champion, led the NHL in scoring 2 times, a 3-time Hart Memorial Trophy winner, 2-time first All-Star team center, 1-time second All-Star team center. So, to your point, Phil, how and why did Howie Morenz die at just 34 years old?
Yeah.
Here we go. On January 28th, 1937, in a game versus the Blackhawks, Morenz suffered a pretty bad broken leg while chasing after a puck and then crashing into the boards. He was taken to the hospital. It was determined that he'd require a long recovery and would miss the rest of the Canadiens' season. He had a very difficult hospital stay, struggled, I think, a lot with mentally with being in there, not being able to move around, and of course, play for his Canadiens team. At one point, he even suffered a nervous breakdown. He was drinking a lot, so they had stories about team members smuggling in booze to him in the hospital at different times, of course. Well, after about 2 months in the hospital on March 8th, 1937, Morenz attempted to get up from his hospital bed to use the washroom and collapsed and died from a pulmonary embolism suffered as a result of his broken leg at just 34 years old. Morenz was so beloved in Montreal that more than 50,000 people came to the Montreal Forum to pay their respects as Morenz's casket was laid at center ice during his funeral a few days later.
I believe it.
Pretty wild.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So why should you care about Howie Morenz? Well, he is considered to be one of the first stars of the NHL. If you're watching on YouTube, the image that we're showing is from the very first NHL All-Star game with the Morenz there. He looks like a biology professor more than a hockey player, doesn't he?
Looks 55 years old.
That's what I was going to say. Like, he looks like he's 48 years old, not 30.
When men were men, right?
Yeah, so he was probably like 33 or something like that in this picture, which is crazy.
Ooh.
He finished in the top 10 in scoring in the league 10 times during his career. And for 7 straight seasons, Morenz led the Canadiens in both goals and points. At the time of his death, he was the all-time NHL leader in points with 472. A 1950 Canadian press poll named Howie Morenz the best hockey player of the first half of the century. That's pretty big. After his death, the Canadiens honored him by retiring his number 7, becoming the first ever number retired by the team. When the NHL announced its top 100 players of all time in 2017, Morenz was on the list. And then finally in May of 2012, the Canadiens honored Morenz by placing a statue outside of the Bell Center. I've never been to the Bell Center. Have either of you, Phil or Mike, and seen the statue there?
I have not. I realize I recognize the name, and now you're going through all the accolades. Now I'm understanding why. Heck of a hockey player, apparently.
Yeah.
One of the best of all time, I guess.
I remember his plaque at the Montreal Forum when my dad used to take me to the old Forum. There were big plaques. Some of them were bigger than others, I remember, and I think his was. They called them the Mitchell Meteor.
Nice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at like Howie Morenz hobby market, as far as pre-war vintage players go, he's one of the bigger names that's collected. And because his NHL career started a little bit later than the first 2 players that we profiled, there's more Howie Morenz cards to collect. The Hod Stewart, he died before the first hockey set in 1910 was created, so there really wasn't any hockey cards. Howie Morenz rookie card is considered this 1923 Patterson V145-1. The highest public sale to date is this PSA 3 we're looking at on YouTube that sold for $16,975 US in April of this year. Then there's 3 other additional Morenz cards that I found from the 1920s. There's the 145-2 from the year later, 1924, where they look so similar. It's kind of crazy. A PSA 5 sold for as much as $4,300 in October 2021. There's, if you guys have ever wondered, like in Clear Cut, this next card connected the dots for me. Those Champs cards, well, it was a cigarette company. I didn't know that because it's not an American brand.
Oh.
So a 1924 Champs cigarette, where a PSA 7 that we're looking at right now sold for as much as $6,433 US in March of 2021. And then the last 20s card of Morenz is a 1924 Maple Crispet, where a PSA 6 sold for as much as $7,079 in 2021. Beyond that, there's a number of Morenz cards you can get in the early 1930s that you can research. I picked out 2 to highlight because I think they're from really cool sets. There's the 1933 O-Pee-Chee Series A. I believe this is the first year of O-Pee-Chee, where a copy with a green background and a PSA 7 graded sold for $4,928 US in February 2017. Now, these came in 4 different background colors. So there's green, red, there's like an orange yellow. I don't know what can't remember what the official color of that is, and then a blue.
Orange Slice, maybe? Blue Taxi? No?
Yeah.
The original parallel.
Buzzword in 1933. And then I think as a testament to his star power, he was included in the 1933 Gaudi Sport King set, which highlighted the top athletes from all the most popular sports in North America. And this PSA 8 copy is sold for as much as $2,858 way back in May of 2015. So there we go. That's it for Howie Morenz. Did we learn anything?
Good job, Josh.
Yeah,
for sure.
Okay.
I always do find, like, after, like I said, listener to the podcast, been listening to the pod for a couple of years now, and I like when you guys did this segment, you started looking back on a bunch of the vintage stuff. Even when you do your deep dive into vintage cards for
Fanatics,
the Fanatic stuff, it always makes me want to, I don't know, start collecting vintage. I've never actually done it. I've never acted on that urge, but it does make me think, and I enjoy looking at them too when I'm like at the show and stuff. Vintage.
So when you're at the expo in a few weeks, if you had to buy a vintage card, let's say, and not even like 70s, like 60s or earlier, which one comes to the top of mind first to you?
Honestly, one of the first one that comes to mind, the 53 Parker set is, I guess, what comes to mind first, right?
Well, the 51 would be the first one.
51. And then actually last year I had a gentleman who I worked with when we went to the show. He was looking for a 63. I think that's why my numbers. He was looking for a 63 Parker set from like his childhood. And I don't know, we went and had like 3 hours, and I took him around trying to find all the vintage dealers, and he was trying to find cards, and he had a blast. He had never been to the show before, and he had just kind of found these cards, and he had heard that I was interested. It was just a guy that also worked at TSN. And we had a blast just like looking through a bunch of vintage cards, and guys that had unbelievable nicknames back in the day, like a Billy Morenz or something like that. Like, he knew all the nicknames. I'm just saying the actual name, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Red so and so." It was just a lot of fun just going through, and like I never had, I guess, an appreciation for vintage prior to that, and kind of since then, and with the help of this podcast, I've kind of grown more of an appreciation for it.
Is there a name that sticks out? So you look at the 51 Parker set. What do you want, like the Gordie Howe or Sawchuck or
probably? If Gordie Howe would be nice.
Yeah,
not too bad.
Nice.
Spendy.
That'd be a nice one.
But nice, yeah. Phil, what's the oldest hockey card you own?
Oh, good question. Probably Guy Lafleur rookie. Yeah, that's as far as back as I go. I don't like. I respect this. I love talking about it. I wish I knew more about it. I'm not interested to collect it, and I don't know why. But I love learning about it. But I'm not going before 70s. I mean,
I don't think that's a bad thing. This is a very broad hobby. I mean, there's tons of stuff, and you got to kind of pick your lanes.
Oh yeah, the hobbies.
So, there's nothing wrong with that.
Pick your tribe.
I have a question for you. Like this stuff doesn't come up on the market a lot, right? Like we're talking about the sales. You're looking back at
Mhm.
2017, 2021. Like they're kind of few and far between. Maybe it comes up once a year, a couple times. Not to get all doom and gloom, but the people who own these cards, who collected these cards, are getting to a point where they may be
Sure.
leaving us. Do you think we see like an influx of these vintage like 20s, 30s, 40s cards kind of hit the market once someone else takes ownership of them and doesn't appreciate them as
The
much? I've always
grandkids,
thought about that. Yeah, and they're
the
just like, let me
grandkids.
cash in on these cards. And then at some point, you have like a lot of these will eventually hit the market.
Maybe you could see a little bit of an uptick, but when you go and like look at like the PSA pop reports on these sets, they're
They're so
tiny,
low. Yeah.
which is why people get really crazy. So like this card we're looking at, the 33 Moran Sport Kings. This is I would assume, if not the highest copy, one of the highest graded copies, and it last sold in 2015. So if this goes up on the Fanatics Collect Weekly or Slab Sharks auction or something like that, there's going to be collectors of this set that are going to go hard
Yeah.
after it. And so I think to me, that's, as an observer of the hobby, that's one of the cool things about vintage is these, what McDavid Young Guns goes up for sale about every hour, I'm sure. When
Yeah.
you have cards that are from very special players, icons of the game, foundation builders of the game that haven't sold in 6, 7, 8 years, it's really fun to see people come out, of the woodwork to really compete and try to win those cards.
What I'm curious to see is in 10, 15, 20 years when we're of the demographic of, so those guys are
Mhm.
going to get going soon, let's say 20 years, who's going to, my worry is who's going to care? Like, I know my son's not going to think of Howie Morenz as I think of Howie Morenz. And if I'm not collecting Howie Morenz, he's definitely not going to collect. It's just going to scale off, and it's kind of sad. That's why I think it's good we keep talking about it. And I
Yeah.
wish I liked vintage, but who's going to buy this in 20 years? Who?
Couldn't you say it about today, though? This guy died in 1937, right? So
Yeah.
we could have easily had that. You could have asked, and it's not a bad question, but you could have asked that question 20 years ago,
And
and it would
more
have been
people would
just
have
as
known.
relevant as it is today. And I don't know, interest in the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle doesn't seem to be waning, or
Yeah.
Wayne Gretzky hasn't played a game in 25 years.
Yeah.
And
It's different than a 1933 card.
sure, I just think that there's a sentiment, a person that has a mentality that's attracted to really old stuff and sees the novelty of a card that, in not too long, like, well, his rookie's over 100 years old now.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy.